Tony, thanks for joining us. My name is Brandon Rosenbluth. I'm the president of Synario. I'm managing director at PFM. Do you want to introduce yourself for 1 second?
Absolutely. I'm Tony Ferrullo. I'm the COO here at Endicott College, and I have been here for about 12 years and have been a Synario client for as long as I can remember.
One of the very first clients I ever worked with back in your days at Endicott College. Well, we appreciate you sitting with us and kind of revisiting the use case that we did really pre-pandemic. I know it was kind of like pre and early days of the pandemic when we first did the case study last time. And so we thought it would be good to sit with you again and really just recap kind of where you were and then kind of how that process and has impacted the planning efforts at Endicott College. And so really that's the first place I want to start is how does an event like the pandemic impact your planning efforts at the college?
It significantly impacts the planning at the college, and it's certainly nothing we were ever prepared for. However, it confirmed that the planning model that we here at Endicott is a good one and that it allowed us to pivot nicely to handle such a pandemic. So pre-pandemic, if you remember, we were really modeling out a new capital plan. We had a new president start in 2018 with lots of ideas, and we were modeling out a number of capital projects and potential projects, a new school of nursing, a new residence halls, things like that the new president wanted to accomplish. So what happens is we're planning that, the pandemic hits, and we quickly pivot to more of best case, most likely case, worst case scenarios for enrollments, not knowing what the pandemic was going to bring. So it was a significant move. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, we almost had to take our model, shelve it, and start a new model that was more enrollment based, pivot on enrollment strategies, what if cases, and the capital projects that we were going to do kind of just sat on the back burner at that point.
Yeah, very good. So any takeaways from taking those lessons learned from at least a process standpoint and looking forward that you'd want to share?
Yeah, I'd say the lessons learned were learning the power of the product, being able to pivot quickly and successfully, turning it into, we had up until that point used the model more of a capital planning model. So we would model our budget, we would take our audits, roll forward the model, we would model out our enrollment strategy and pricing and various assumptions and determine which capital projects we could do and when. So turning various projects on and off, taking a look at how they impacted the financials. The lesson learned was that we were quickly able to pivot and use it more as an operations tool, which I think was powerful for us. And as we think about modeling going forward, that's very important. So less capital focused and more operations. So what happens if enrollment goes down and how does that impact my margin? And, are we able to continue to do pay raises and new hires? And, whether that had to do with the pandemic or just operations in general, the lesson learned was that the model could be used much more for operations than just the capital pieces that we were using.
Yeah, and having everything in one place allows you to pivot very quickly as well.
And it was important for our board to be able to see those levers that we're able to pull, right? So we were able to pull certain levers to build, buildings and move forward capital projects and deferred maintenance things. And then for the board to see, well, we can model out enrollment strategies and discounts and how do various potential dip in enrollment and unknowns impact the general operation of the institution. So I think it gave the board also an opportunity to see the power of the model and how it could be used.
Yeah. Great. Well, speaking of enrollment, you're a small private in the Northeast. The enrollment cliff is on everyone's mind. You seem to be bucking that trend a bit. When I look at your enrollment numbers, they've been pretty positive and growing in kind of substantial headwinds. How have you been able to manage that, and what impacts do you expect in the coming years for enrollment?
So I think we sit here a little differently than some of my peers. You're right. Applications continue to go up. Our accept rate has been going down, yet the yield is still going higher. So it is a trend that we're bucking. We're at a point that we're starting to see meeting our physical capacity as we're less about trying to worry about enrollment slowing down, maybe because of the enrollment cliff, and more because we just may not be able to service any more students on the undergraduate side. I'd say Endicott is in a neat position. We're sitting here on the North Shore on the water. We have a beautiful campus. We have an internship program that's part of the curriculum that leads to great outcomes for our students, which I think is why we've been able to buck the trend. So as far as modeling goes, as we look forward, it's less about the enrollment cliff, but more about what size do we need to be? And that's a critical question for Endicott. I think I've been asking it for the 10 years that I've been here, and we still continue to ask it. We're getting to the point that, our physical capacity for the number of students living and coming to campus are starting to get stretched. So dining hall is starting to reach capacity. We are opening a new residence hall this year, so that will help. But housing is meeting its capacity, and we just don't have many building lots available still on campus. Or maybe we just have to rethink how we do some things. Maybe we need less cars on campus and can build in more of the parking lots and maybe develop things like that. But I'd say as far as enrollment goes, it's less about the cliff and more about what can we service for our students.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting problem particularly in higher ed as you grow. I mean, growth is not always the goal in the higher ed business. And like, how do you keep Endicott, kind of the culture of Endicott and the student experience where it has been that has made you successful versus kind of continuing to grow and building out more dorms? You might lose some of that student experience. So do you have any conversations on that front to maintain the student experience?
Yeah, we've talked a lot at the board level, especially, and as we talk about looking forward, what size should Endicott be? Because to your point, we tout ourselves as small student to faculty ratios, small classes, nice personal touch for the students. When you start to hit the total enrollment of roughly 3,000 students, you're starting to change a little bit of that. So that's kind of, where we're going as an institution. What size do we want to be? We have not talked about our graduate programs yet. There is a lot of opportunity to grow those, but the undergraduate living on campus student body is something that we are spending a lot of time discussing. What size should that be? What kind of an institution do we want to be? And how do we maintain all of that personal touch that made us successful?
Yeah. Very interesting. So the other side of kind of the tuition revenue coin is pricing. So another kind of obviously national trend is people are, I guess, maybe not questioning the value of higher ed, but certainly aware of the cost. And there's a lot of pressure to limit the increases and keep it affordable. How have you been balancing your tuition and the rate that students pay?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done here at Endicott, if you take a look at our gross price for tuition, room, and board has still not reached $60,000 a year. So we're sitting at about $58,000 a year. We think that's another reason why we get a lot of students to come to our campus. And when you come to campus and visit, a lot of students will want to come here because we show quite well. So we had a lot of discussion about price, gross price, net price. What does our tuition discount look like? That's another piece of what we're trying to do. While our gross price is low, we also have a pretty low discount rate. We're at about 42% discount rate, but constantly worried about the student experience along with their debt load. And we think that we're priced in the right spot. We have a mindset of small, steady increases. Don't fix what isn't broke. But at the same time, there's different opportunities there with pricing. And we talk a lot about how it impacts students. That's one of the first things that our president talks about at open houses and accepted students day. What's interesting about our gross price is that our discount packages may not look as attractive. So we spend a lot of time educating families to look at the net cost of a school. So if a competitor offers them a package that's quite a bit higher than ours, but their starting point is higher than ours, that's one of the challenges, is to make sure that they understand the net price piece of this. But pricing is important, and we feel that where we are at a gross price level is something that's kind of an advantage for us.
What about other sources? So we have obviously tuition, net tuition being the main driver, but some other strategies we hear are revenue diversification and finding other sources. Do you have any strategies for that?
We do, and that's really important, right? So we're constantly talking about diversification of revenue, becoming less student revenue dependent. We're lucky here at Endicott that we have significant auxiliary revenue. So we have about $10 million of gross auxiliary revenue a year on 2 different wedding venues. We have a hotel on campus and a conference center. So the hotel and conference center and the second venue, which is Mistlewood, we run upwards of 140 weddings a year, which is significant and brings in some nice, good gross revenue for us, as well as the hotel. And the second piece of that hotel is also we run a hospitality program here, and our students are able to work in the hotel. So it's also got an academic focus to it.
Yep.
So that's one piece of revenue diversification. I think the second piece is we're in the middle of our very first comprehensive capital campaign. When our new president, Dr. Stephen Salvo, started in 2019, he comes with a philanthropic background, and we are halfway through a $75 million comprehensive capital campaign that's raising money for endowment, operations, and capital improvements. So I think those are 2 things that we have focused on recently to help us diversify our revenue. And when you think about future capital projects, we're always thinking about the return on our investment. So we're currently undergoing a renovation at that hotel. We're currently having plans on what can we do with those wedding venues to make them even more distinguished and popular and a real advantage for us. But those 2 things have really helped us diversify the revenue over the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years.
Yeah. Activating the alumni network. Smart.
At Endicott, it's interesting. The story of Endicott is we're at a 2-year women's school up until the late 1980s. It then became a 4-year school. It then became co-ed in the late 90s. And now we have graduate and PhD programs. But when you think about our alumni base, those students that went through the 4-year program and those graduate programs are just now at the point where they may be able to start to give a little bit. So it's a good timing for us to start to hit that alumni base and have them give back to the institution. And it's been pretty successful up to this point.
Very good. So kind of a specific follow-up question to the use case that we did a couple of years ago. So when we left off talking, the plan was to hold off on building a new residence hall in favor of leasing an apartment building in town as the more cost-effective way to go. As you mentioned, when the pandemic struck, things were put on hold. With specific to the lease and the new residence hall, what happened? Did you lease it? Did you end up building the new residence hall? Where are you in that process?
So I believe, handled the COVID situation quite well. It was stressful as we went through it, and I can't tell you that the decisions we made at the time we thought were right, and we stuck to them, but they were scary. So when the pandemic hit in March of 2020 and we sent our students home for the end of the spring semester, we brought them all back the start of September. So all of our students came back September 2020. We really were just out of pocket for 6 weeks. But in that, having those students here on campus, we saw the revenue continue to grow. And in so doing, we ended up having to build the residence hall and maintain the off-campus leases. So we did both. So the new residence hall is Venuti Hall. It's going to open this September. And that's part of the reason why we had to keep the off campus is that we still needed those beds. But what we're finding is Venuti Hall opens this September and we're still maintaining about 100 beds off campus. So we continue to lease off campus. It offers our upperclassmen a different kind of living. And those students that are doing internships off campus and in the city, they live closer to the trains, and some of those units are much nicer with kitchens and things like that. So we found it a benefit to maintain the off campus while also building that new residence hall. But again, the demand is there, and that's why we had to do both.
Yeah. And so even though, some of the decisions, whether they were right or wrong in hindsight, the commitment of the team and kind of call it the consensus building that you went through paid dividends regardless.
It definitely did. Having those students visit us that year and having parents say, "Oh, we're not seeing a campus that's open sometimes." And, we had a testing center. We were committed to being open. We had a strong faculty group that was committed to being here, even though it was scary. And you're right. I don't know if those decisions were right or wrong, but they certainly were a benefit to us coming out of the pandemic. And I'm proud to say that through the pandemic, we were able to pay all of our people. We did not have to cut benefits. We paid everyone, whether they worked on campus or not. That was part of the president's commitment, was to take care of our people. So all of that seemed to work out well for us, as coming out of it, we were in a much better financial position than I expected, which allowed us to not only continue on and build that residence hall, but we also built a brand new School of Nursing and Health Sciences that opened last fall. So we were able to come out of the pandemic. And if you remember, before the pandemic, we were modeling these two projects. Mm-hmm. In pre-pandemic, we thought we would build the residence hall before the nursing school. And when we came out of the pandemic, it made more sense to get the nursing school built and the residence hall after that. So the beauty of, as scary and as hard as the pandemic was, we were able to continue on with the plan that we had in place pre-pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congrats. That's quite the success story. All right. So looking ahead, what does the future have in store for Endicott?
Yeah. So this is a good crossroad. So where this leads us is here, fiscal 25, which is the fiscal year we've just started. And I've had these conversations with my board. It's the end of 5 years of our president. We went through a pandemic. We were able to basically complete the capital plan that he had come up with when he first came here. So we got that nursing building built. We have the new dorm ready to go. And we have implemented Workday. So we've been in the middle of replacing our EIP system. And those were 3 significant projects that basically come to an end in fiscal 25. So when you think about fiscal 26 and forward, it's almost like a clean slate for us. What's next? So where we are right now is we had a board retreat in March where we had a lot of conversations about where do we want Endicott to go? What are some of the initiatives that we're coming up with? So I am working with each vice president on campus to review their growth strategy and their priorities. And what we're going to do as a board and as a team is we're going to lay all those things out into the model. And I'm going to model out all these initiatives. And we as a board, as we start our fiscal 26 planning, it's going to be a multi-year effort. We're going to prioritize the highest need and the highest desired, most worthwhile projects to go forward. So fiscal 26 will be the planning for fiscal 26 will be a significant planning effort that's going to include modeling, not just capital, because let's go back to what we learned from the model during COVID. We're not going to just model capital projects, but we're going to be modeling operating initiatives. So I meet with the provost and what are the new majors we're thinking of getting into and what might those cost. I meet with the vice president for student affairs and external engagement and what are the student life initiatives that we have. Athletics, are there new sports that we want to get into? Enrollment, with what different strategies, including on the graduate side, I alluded to that. And what are the things that we want to accomplish? So it's kind of been a nice crossroads of completing the first 5 years of our president's tenure and looking ahead for the next 3 to 5 years of where do we want to go. So we're a different place than when we were when he started. We're healthy. We want to remain healthy. And how do we prioritize what's next? And we're going to use the model to help determine what makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I will build all these projects and I will turn them all on, and the model will show we can't do everything. And then we will dig in as a board in a group starting in an October board meeting with what's next. And that's some of the planning process we're going through right now.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a great use of Synario. So you bring that live to your board and even finance committee meetings. Have you seen any either tangible benefits or intangible ones? You feel like people are more bought in than they were previously to using Synario live like that?
Yeah, I think what it does is it gives them, it's always nice to see that you can, in a live format, pull some of the levers that's important to us. So, hey, what happens if enrollment goes down? What does it look like? What happens if inflation goes up? What might that look like? And as you model it out and you can show that live, and you can see a live feed of what happens to the financials. And, we're very margin driven. So a lot of it is based on what does this do to our margin? It's really beneficial it's more at the finance committee than at the full board, but it's very beneficial for those members to see that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we've done that I think is really important is we've built some financial guardrails into the model. So we've identified 4 or 5, or we're in the process of doing this, 4 or 5 key metrics that we want to maintain. We have certain bond covenants we need to meet, but then there are other metrics, spendable assets, the debt, things like that you want to, while we're healthy and we want to do a lot, we also want to, I pride myself on we live within our means. Mm-hmm. We don't spend the money we don't have. And by implementing some financial guardrails and ratios, not only do you see what the projects that get turned on and off and the levers that get pulled, not only do you see what it does to the margin, but you see what it does to the ratios. And we set goals for those ratios. And the model's powerful enough to show, hey, if you do these 3 things, you're not going to meet these 2 ratios that are critical to your business. And it just helps frame the decisions better. Mm-hmm. It's important, I think, while we sit here and we talk about a lot of good news, it's not always going to be good. We hope it is, but it might not always be good. And so we preach that we are going to live within our means, that we're going to get there, we're going to do what's critical to the institution, and we're not going to overspend and spend money we don't have. Yeah. And it's worked. It's kind of worked in the past, and try not to sway too much from that.
Just, I guess, one final question on operations. So we've discussed enrollment and pricing. Obviously, expenses is the other side of the coin, and with inflation, costs are up across the board, wages and the like. How are you approaching, and maybe for you, with the growth that you're achieving, maybe the answer is, we are mindful but not doing anything drastic. But how have you managed expense growth for the institution?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I just want to talk about our structure. Endicott, it's in those infant stages where we became a 4-year school, went co-ed, added graduate programs. A lot of what we did was on a top-down approach. Vice presidents worked, we worked with teams. What we have done recently over the last 3 years is developed a budget office, which a lot of schools already have, but we didn't. So we now have a director of budget and financial planning. We have identified budget and cost center managers who are being trained on just how to look at that budget and how to manage through what they have. I would say it's exactly what you said. We're mindful of the expense growth with our enrollment growth, but we do a lot of work with the departments to try to self-fund things, reallocate funds, and do things like that as we try to control the expense base. And that has worked for us pretty well. I think getting department managers involved in their budgets and get an understanding of where they're spending their money and what's critical and to think about their highest priorities has done well. We also, during COVID, took the opportunity to do a kind of a modified zero-based budget, which really helped. So Before COVID, we sort of would carry budgets forward. I would never sweep money from anybody, but what we did do was during COVID, we had people really dig in and look at their expense base and where they could find some savings, if there was some, and we were able to reallocate that to other departments. So we're kind of came out of COVID at a good spot for departments where I think they were well funded and for what they needed. And now, even with the inflation, we're able to balance that and, replace some dollars in areas like utilities and things that have really been affected. But the budget office and the work that they're doing is really helping us get an understanding of expense budgets, what's critical, fund what's really needed to be funded, and try to self-fund things within departments as they reallocate money. I will say that that's where we are now, but in the model that I'm going to do for the next 3 years, this becomes more critical because I think we were able to handle the recent inflation by self-funding some things and moving some money around. Going forward, that may not be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a key aspect of that is the training that you're talking about. So I see a lot of, and this is true in every organization, not just higher ed, but new systems get put in place or new people get promoted into new roles, and there's just very little professional development and training that goes into it. So I think the fact that you're supplementing some of the changes with the development and training is at least a piece of why you're having the success that you're having. So that's great. All right, Tony. So last question. What would you say to anyone thinking about trying to get into the Synario platform?
Great. Back, I don't know how many years ago I met you, Brandon, 10 years ago, I was trying to do models and different scenarios and planning circumstances through an Excel spreadsheet and trying to build various worksheets that linked together led to lots of errors. So when we looked at trying to find something different, we found this scenario model. The benefit of being able to go through all of the important levers that are important to us. So you set your enrollment, you set assumptions, you get to see how it impacts operations, you build projects, turn them on and off. And the fact that you can see it, not only how it impacts your P&L, which we all used to model out, but we can see a balance sheet and what it does to various asset balances and cash balances. It's a powerful tool that has been very beneficial to me at 2 different schools with boards that have a lot of confidence in it and has allowed us to make some really good decisions over especially the last 5 years with the new president. The second thing I would say is you get fantastic support from the team that I've been given. So I started out working with you, and then I've been given other consultants that are always at the ready, very smart, intelligent, talented folks that I'm not a super technical person, as our consultants probably will tell you, but they're always happy to help drive and build the spreadsheet for me, and they always help me to craft my story for the board, and that's important, is to have that support as well. So not only is the tool powerful and allows me to make and our team to make some good data-driven decisions, but we're also working with consultants that are always there to help, and not just help, but they've been great at advising as well.
Well, that's great to hear. I appreciate that. Tony, thanks for your time. We'll do this again in 3 to 4 years. We'll revisit it. So I appreciate it.
Great.